The stranger from the stars. The cargo freighter Meridian's Hope shuddered violently as another plasma burst tore through its hull. Marcus Chin gripped the control stick with white knuckles, his heart hammering against his ribs as alarms screamed throughout the cockpit. 3 pirate vessels circled him like vultures, their weapons glowing with deadly intent. He was supposed to be delivering medical supplies to the colony on Epsilon Prime. A simple run. A safe run. The kind of job that paid enough to keep his ship fueled and his stomach full. Nobody had mentioned pirates controlling the sector now. Another hit rocked the ship, and Marcus watched in horror as his navigation systems flickered and died. The emergency protocols activated automatically, searching for the nearest habitable planet. His fingers flew across the remaining functional controls, trying to maintain some semblance of control as the ship began its unplanned descent. Through the viewport he saw it. A planet unlike anything in his star charts. It glowed with an ethereal purple and silver light, its surface covered in vast crystalline forests and shimmering oceans. Beautiful and utterly unknown. The ship's computer managed one final warning before going completely dark. Forbidden Zone. Thessaran Sovereign Space. Unauthorized entry punishable by death. Marcus laughed bitterly. Death by unauthorized entry or death by pirate weapons. Some choice. At least the planet looked prettier than the cold vacuum of space. The Meridian's Hope entered the atmosphere like a meteor, flames engulfing the hull as friction fought against velocity. Marcus held on, his training taking over even as terror clawed at his mind. He had survived worse odds before. He had grown up on the harsh mining colonies of Titan, where a faulty seal or a cracked helmet meant instant death. He had learned early that survival was not about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about being too stubborn to quit. The ship screamed toward the surface, trees and structures blurring past the viewport. Marcus caught a glimpse of massive towers that seemed to grow from the ground itself, bridges made of light connecting impossible architecture. Then everything went dark as the ship slammed into something soft and yielding. When Marcus opened his eyes, he was unsure how much time had passed. Pain radiated through his body in waves, each breath a struggle. The cockpit was crushed around him, but he was alive. Somehow impossibly alive. He managed to release his safety harness and crawl through the shattered viewport. The air outside was warm and sweet, filled with scents he could not identify. He had crashed into what appeared to be a garden, the ship's impact cushioned by massive flowering plants that glowed faintly in the twilight. Marcus pulled himself away from the wreckage, his medical training assessing his injuries automatically. Broken ribs definitely. Possible concussion. Various cuts and bruises that would heal if he lived long enough. His survival kit was still strapped to his belt, a small mercy. He looked around trying to understand where he was. The garden stretched in every direction, filled with plants that defied earth botany. Trees with silver bark that chimed softly in the breeze. Flowers that seemed to breathe, their petals opening and closing in slow rhythm. In the distance, he could see the towers he had glimpsed during his descent, now clearly part of an enormous palace that dominated the landscape. He had crashed in someone's backyard. And based on the size of that palace, someone very important. Marcus knew he should move, should hide, should do something other than collapse among the alien flowers. But his body had other ideas. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by exhaustion and pain. He managed to drag himself behind a cluster of the large glowing plants before consciousness slipped away. He dreamed of Earth. Of the small apartment he had shared with his sister before she died in the colony collapse. Of the promise he had made to her, to see the stars, to live enough for both of them. He dreamed of all the places he had been, all the worlds he had walked upon, always alone, always moving, never quite belonging anywhere. When he woke he thought he was still dreaming. A face hovered above him, beautiful and utterly alien. Skin that shimmered like pearl, large eyes that held the depth of twin galaxies, features that were almost human but refined in ways that spoke of a completely different evolutionary path. She wore robes of flowing silver that seemed to move with a life of their own, and on her head rested a circlet of woven light. She spoke, and though Marcus could not understand the words, the tone was clear. Concern. Curiosity. Perhaps a hint of fear. He tried to speak, to explain, but his voice came out as a croak. The woman, for he thought of her as a woman despite her alien features, reached out slowly. Her hand was cool against his forehead, and Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation spread from the point of contact. She spoke again, and this time Marcus caught something in her tone. A question. She was asking him something, but he had no way to answer. He pointed to himself. Marcus, he said slowly. My name is Marcus Chen. Human. From Earth. The woman tilted her head, clearly not understanding. but she seemed to recognize that he was trying to communicate. She pointed to herself and spoke a word that sounded like music. Liara. Marcus tried to repeat it, his pronunciation clumsy. Liara. She smiled and Marcus felt his breath catch. It was a genuine smile, warm and without malice. In that moment he understood that whatever else happened, she did not mean him immediate harm. Liara stood and gestured for him to remain still. She moved with a grace that made her seem to float rather than walk, disappearing into the garden. Marcus considered trying to escape, but where would he go? He was on an alien world, injured, with no ship and no way to call for help. Running would only delay the inevitable. She returned within minutes, carrying what appeared to be medical supplies and food. The food was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen, fruits that glowed softly and bread that seemed to shimmer, but his stomach growled loudly enough to override his caution. Liara knelt beside him and began treating his wounds with substances that stung briefly before numbing the pain. Her touch was gentle but efficient, and Marcus realized she had medical knowledge. As she worked, she spoke softly in her own language, and Marcus found himself responding in English, even though neither understood the other. It became a strange conversation, two beings from different worlds trying to bridge an impossible gap with tone and gesture alone. Over the following days, Marcus began to understand his situation more clearly. Liara came to him every night, always after darkness fell, always bringing food and medicine. She was hiding him. During the day, he could hear voices in the distance, see figures moving through the garden, but none came close to his hiding place among the glowing plants. Liara was patient in teaching him her language. She would point to objects and speak their names. Marcus, who had picked up a dozen languages during his travels through human space, applied himself with desperate intensity. Communication was survival. Within 2 weeks he could understand basic phrases. Within a month he could hold simple conversations. And as his language skills grew, so did his understanding of the woman who had saved him. Princess Liara was the only daughter of Queen Vethera, ruler of the Thessaran Empire. She was 340 years old, though by her species standards that made her quite young. She had never left her homeworld, never traveled beyond the palace gardens where Marcus had crashed. Her life was one of duty and obligation, every moment scheduled, every action scrutinized. She told him about the arranged marriage that awaited her. Lord Calix of the Nethra system, a political alliance meant to end decades of border conflicts. She would meet him for the first time at their wedding ceremony in 4 months. "Do you love him?" Marcus asked one night, his Thessaran still awkward but improving. Liara looked surprised by the question. "Love is not considered in such matters. The alliance is what matters. The peace is what matters. But what about what you want?" She smiled sadly. "What I want has never been relevant." Marcus told her about Earth, about humanity's relatively short history among the stars. He told her about growing up on Titan, about losing his sister, about the promise he made to live fully because she never got the chance. He told her about the cargo runs that took him from world to world, never staying long enough to form attachments, always moving. "That sounds lonely," Liara said softly. "It is," Marcus admitted. "But it is safer than caring too much. Everything ends. People die. Places change. If you do not attach yourself to anything, you cannot lose anything. Is that truly living?" Liara asked. "Or is it just surviving?" The question haunted Marcus long after their conversation ended. As the weeks turned into months, something shifted between them. Marcus healed, his ribs mending, his strength returning. He should have been planning his escape, finding a way off this world. But every night when Liara arrived, he found reasons to stay just a little longer. They talked about everything. Philosophy and science, art and music, the nature of consciousness and the meaning of existence. Marcus learned that despite their different origins, humans and Thessarans were not so different. They both loved and feared. They both hoped and dreamed. They both wondered about their place in the vast cosmos. One night, 3 months after his arrival, Liara came to him with tears shimmering in her eyes. "The wedding has been moved forward," she said. 2 weeks from now. They want to finalize the alliance before the seasonal storms make travel difficult." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. 2 weeks. After that, she would be gone, bound to a stranger for political convenience. "Run away with me," he said suddenly. Liara stared at him. "What? Run away? Leave this place? I can find a way off this world. We can go anywhere in the galaxy." "Marcus, I cannot. My duty, my people, the alliance." "What about your life?" Marcus stood, taking her hands in his. "What about your happiness?" Liara, these past months I have felt more alive than I have in years. You showed me that surviving is not the same as living. Do not tell me that all you are meant for is to be a piece in someone else's political game. It is not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Come with me. We will find a way. Liara pulled her hands away, wrapping her arms around herself. You do not understand. If I abandon my duty, it could mean war. Thousands could die. And what about you? Marcus asked quietly. Do you count in that equation at all? She had no answer. The next night, Liara returned with a different energy. There was determination in her eyes, a decision made. There is an old tradition, she said. From before the empire grew large and complicated. A bonding ceremony that requires only 2 willing hearts and the light of our 3 moons. It is simple but legally binding. Marcus's heart began to race. What are you saying? I am saying that I cannot run. My duty to my people is real. But perhaps there is another way. She looked at him with those galaxy-deep eyes. If I am already bonded, already married, then the arrangement with Lord Calyx becomes void. There would be political consequences, anger, perhaps sanctions. But not war. Not death. Liara, are you asking? I am asking if you would be willing to bond with me. To stand beside me as we face whatever comes. I cannot promise you an easy life. You would be scrutinized, questioned, possibly hated. But you would be here. With me. Marcus thought about all the worlds he had seen, all the places he had been. He thought about the loneliness he had carried like a shield, protecting himself from loss by never allowing himself to have anything worth losing. And he thought about the woman who had found him broken in her garden and had shown him kindness when she had no reason to. Yes, he said. Yes, I will. They performed the ceremony that night, under the light of 3 moons that painted the garden in silver and blue and gold. There were no witnesses except the glowing flowers, no grand pronouncements except the ones they made to each other. Liara spoke ancient words in her language, and Marcus responded with vows of his own. When it was done, she pressed her forehead to his, a Thessaran gesture of deep intimacy and trust. Whatever happens now, she whispered, we face it together. Marcus held her close, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, so different from his own yet somehow perfectly in sync. They had 1 week of peace. 1 week of stolen moments in the garden, of whispered conversations and shared dreams. Marcus taught Liara about human music, singing old songs his sister used to love. Liara showed Marcus how to read the patterns in the glowing plants, ancient knowledge passed down through her family. They were building something fragile and precious, a bridge between 2 worlds that had never known each other existed. On the 8th day the guards came. Marcus was repairing a broken irrigation system, using skills from his years as a cargo pilot where you learn to fix anything or die in the vacuum. He had become comfortable in the garden, perhaps too comfortable. He heard the shouts before he saw them. 6 palace guards in ceremonial armor, weapons drawn, surrounding him with efficient precision. Marcus raised his hands slowly, knowing that resistance would be suicide. Alien intruder, the lead guard spoke in harsh Thessaran. You will come with us. Now. They placed him in restraints that hummed with energy, bonds that would shock him if he struggled. Marcus went quietly, his mind racing. Where was Liara? Did she know? Was she safe? They dragged him through the palace, through corridors of impossible beauty that Marcus could not appreciate in his current state. Citizens and nobles alike stopped to stare at the strange creature being paraded through their halls. He heard whispers, felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. Finally they reached the throne room. It was the most magnificent space Marcus had ever seen. The ceiling soared impossibly high, covered in mosaics that seemed to shift and change as he watched. Columns of crystal rose from the floor, each one containing swirling light. And at the far end, on a throne that appeared to be carved from a single massive gemstone, sat Queen Vethra. She was terrifying in her majesty. Larger than Liara, her skin shimmering with deeper hues, her eyes cold and calculating. She wore robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself, and her crown was a construction of precious metals and living light that would have been priceless beyond measure on any human world. The guards forced Marcus to his knees before her. The throne room was packed with nobles and advisors, all watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to disgust. Queen Vethra studied him for a long moment, her face unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Who are you? She demanded in perfect, unaccented English that shocked Marcus. Why have you violated our sovereign space? How did you infiltrate our most sacred grounds? Marcus opened his mouth to answer, his mind scrambling for words that might save his life, when a voice rang out from the side of the throne room. Mother, stop. Princess Liara strode forward, her own robes of silver billowing behind her. The court gasped collectively, advisors stepping back as she approached the throne. Marcus had never seen her like this, radiating authority and determination. Liara, the queen said, her voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. Explain to me why an alien creature has been living in our gardens for 3 months. Explain to me why you said nothing. Liara stopped beside Marcus, and in a gesture that made the entire court inhale sharply, she reached down and placed her hand on his shoulder. I said nothing, Liara spoke clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast room, because this is a private matter. A matter of the heart. A matter of the heart? The queen's eyes narrowed. Speak plainly, daughter. Liara lifted her chin, meeting her mother's gaze without flinching. Marcus saw the fear in her eyes, but he also saw courage burning brighter than that fear. Who is he? Queen Vethra demanded, gesturing at Marcus. Who is this human? Princess Liara smiled then, a real smile that transformed her face. She looked down at Marcus, and he saw in her eyes everything they had built together in those stolen months. Every conversation. Every shared dream. Every moment of connection across the vast gulf between their worlds. She looked back at her mother, at the assembled court, at the hundreds of Thesserans who waited to hear her answer. He is my husband, Liara said clearly. The man I wed under the light of 3 moons, according to the ancient traditions of our people. Marcus Chin of Earth is my bonded partner, recognized by the old laws that even you, mother, cannot simply dismiss. The throne room erupted into chaos, but Marcus heard none of it. He was looking up at Liara, at the woman who had saved him and changed him, who had chosen him when she had every reason not to. And as guards shouted and nobles argued and Queen Vethra rose from her throne with fury in her eyes, Marcus understood something profound. He had spent years running from attachments, protecting himself from loss. But standing here, facing possible execution, bound to a woman from another world who had chosen to stand beside him against the universe itself, Marcus Chin finally understood what his sister had tried to tell him before she died. Some things were worth the risk. Some things were worth fighting for. Some connections were worth the inevitable pain of their ending. Love, it turned out, was one of those things. The queen's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Silence. The throne room fell quiet, every eye turning to the monarch. She stared at her daughter, at Marcus, her expression unreadable. You have done something unprecedented, Queen Vethra said slowly. Something that will have consequences far beyond this room. But if what you say is true, if you have truly performed the ancient bonding. She paused, her jaw clenching. Then we must put it to the test. She turned her gaze to Marcus, and he felt the full weight of her scrutiny. Marcus Chin of Earth, you claim to be bonded to my daughter, heir to the Thesseran throne. If this is true, then you must prove yourself worthy of such a position. I hereby invoke the trial of 3. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Marcus did not understand the significance, but he saw Liara's face go pale. Mother, no, Liara breathed. The trials have not been invoked in 1,000 years. They were designed for our people, not for fragile, short-lived humans? The queen finished coldly. Precisely. If this human truly means to stand beside you, then let him prove he has the strength to do so. 3 trials. Wisdom, courage, and heart. If he succeeds, I will accept this bonding. If he fails. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Marcus stood slowly, the guards not preventing him this time. He looked at Liara, saw the fear and love warring in her eyes. Then he turned to face the queen. I accept, he said, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through him. When do we begin? Queen Vethra's expression remained cold, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise perhaps. Or respect. Tomorrow, she said. At dawn. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on you, Marcus Chin. You will need it. As the guards led him away to prepare, Marcus looked back one last time at Liara. She smiled at him through her tears and he smiled back. He had survived a crash landing. He had survived 3 months in hiding. He would survive whatever came next. He had to. Because for the first time in his life, Marcus Chin had found something worth living for. The 3 trials and a new future. The holding chamber where they kept Marcus was not a cell exactly. It was more like a guest room with guards posted outside. The Thesserans, it seemed, believed in treating even condemned prisoners with a certain dignity. Marcus appreciated that, even if it did nothing to calm the anxiety churning in his gut. He sat on the edge of the sleeping platform, staring at his hands. These were the hands of a mechanic, a cargo pilot, a survivor. calloused and scarred from years of hard work. Not the hands of someone who belonged in a palace. Not the hands of someone who should be married to a princess. And yet here he was. The door opened without warning and Liara slipped inside. The guards did not stop her. Perhaps they knew better than to stand between a princess and her chosen path. She rushed to him and Marcus stood to meet her. They embraced and for a moment the world outside ceased to exist. It was just the two of them holding each other against whatever storm was coming. "I am so sorry," Liara whispered against his chest. "I should have found another way. I should have protected you better." Marcus pulled back enough to look at her face. "You saved my life. You gave me 3 months of happiness I never expected to have. You chose to stand with me when it would have been easier to let me die. Do not apologize for any of that." "The trials," she said, her voice breaking. "Marcus, they are designed to test the limits of Thessaran endurance. My people live for thousands of years. We are stronger, faster, our minds work differently. These trials were created to challenge us. For a human, they will be difficult," Marcus finished. "I understand. But Liara, I have been underestimated my entire life. People look at me and see someone ordinary. Someone who should not have survived growing up on Titan. Someone who should not have made it as an independent cargo pilot. Someone who definitely should not have survived crashing on a forbidden world." He cupped her face gently. "Let them underestimate me one more time." Liara laughed despite her tears. "You are the most stubborn creature I have ever met." "I learned from the best," Marcus said, thinking of his sister. "She used to tell me that stubbornness is just another word for hope that refuses to quit." They spent the rest of the night talking, not about the trials but about everything else. About the future they hoped to have. About the places Marcus wanted to show her. About the things they still wanted to learn about each other. They talked until the sky began to lighten, until the guards knocked politely to announce it was time. Marcus stood, straightened his borrowed Thessaran clothes, and prepared to face whatever came next. The first trial was held in the Hall of Ancients, a vast library that contained thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. The walls were lined with crystalline data storage, each one glowing softly with the wisdom of generations. Scholars and advisors filled the galleries above, watching with intense interest. Queen Vethra stood at the center of the hall, her expression stern. Beside her was an elderly Thessaran male whose skin had faded to pale silver with age. He wore robes covered in symbols Marcus did not recognize. "This is Elder Thonix," the queen announced. "He will administer the trial of wisdom." Marcus' chin approached. Marcus walked forward, his heart hammering but his steps steady. He could feel hundreds of eyes upon him, judging, measuring, finding him wanting. Elder Thonix studied him with eyes that had seen millennia pass. When he spoke, his voice was thin but clear. "For 3,000 years, scholars have pondered the riddle of endless recursion. It is inscribed on the tablet of first principles, left by our ancestors as a test for those who claim wisdom." He gestured, and a massive tablet rose from the floor, covered in flowing Thessaran script that seemed to shift and change as Marcus watched. The riddle asks, what is the nature of that which contains itself, defines itself, yet exists only through acknowledgement of what it is not? Generations of our greatest minds have offered answers. All have been found insufficient. Solve this riddle, human, and you pass the first trial. Marcus stared at the tablet, his mind racing. He had been on this world for 3 months, learning the language, but the philosophical concepts were complex. He read the inscription carefully, forcing his brain to work through the dense Thessaran terminology. The nature of that which contains itself. A paradox. Something self-referential. But also defined by what it is not. By negation. By boundary. The Thessaran scholars would approach this through their own cultural lens, through their understanding of eternal existence, through philosophical frameworks built over millennia. But Marcus was not Thessaran. He was human. He thought differently. He thought about his sister. About the last conversation they had before the colony collapse. She had been studying philosophy at the time, fascinated by the ancient human thinkers. She had asked him a question that haunted him still. If you define yourself only by what you do, what happens when you stop doing it? Are you still you? Identity. The riddle was about identity. Marcus turned to Elder Thonix. "May I ask a question before I answer?" The elder's eyebrows rose. "That is unusual, but permitted. In Thessaran philosophy, do you believe consciousness exists independently of the body?" Thonix seemed surprised by the question. "Of course. Consciousness is the eternal essence. The body is merely temporary housing." "And in human philosophy," Marcus said carefully, We debate this constantly. Some believe consciousness is just brain activity. Others believe it is something more. But we all agree on one thing. We only know we are conscious because we can observe our own thoughts. We are self-aware. We contain our own awareness of ourselves. He turned to face the assembled scholars. But here is the key. We only understand what consciousness is by understanding what it is not. We know we are conscious because we can imagine not being conscious. We know we think because we can imagine not thinking. Our identity, our sense of self, exists in the space between being and non-being. He looked back at the tablet. The answer to the riddle is consciousness itself. Or more specifically, self-awareness. It contains itself because awareness is aware of awareness. It defines itself because each being's consciousness is unique to them. But it exists only through acknowledgement of what it is not, because without the concept of unconsciousness, of the other, of the non-self, consciousness has no meaning. The hall was silent. Elder Thonik stared at him, his ancient eyes wide. Queen Vethra's expression was unreadable. Finally Thonik spoke. In 3,000 years, no one has approached the riddle from that angle. We have always focused on the eternal nature of consciousness, never on the paradox of its definition. He paused, then slowly nodded. Your answer is not the one our ancestors likely intended. But it is philosophically sound and perhaps more profound than anything we have conceived. He turned to the queen. He has passed the trial of wisdom. A murmur ran through the assembled scholars. Some seemed impressed. Others looked offended that a human had solved what they could not. Marcus just felt relieved. 1 down. 2 to go. The second trial was held in a place that made Marcus's blood run cold the moment he saw it. The void caverns lay beneath the palace, a network of tunnels that descended into the planet's crust. The entrance was a massive archway carved with warnings in ancient Thessaran script. The trial of courage, Queen Vethra announced, her voice echoing in the cavern mouth. Few Thessarans have entered these caverns and returned. Those who did spoke of terrors that feed on fear itself, of darkness that consumes light and hope. You must enter alone. You must reach the chamber of echoes at the cavern's heart. If you return with proof of your arrival, you pass. If you do not return. She left the rest unsaid. Liara stepped forward, her face pale. Mother, please. These caverns killed 2 of our strongest warriors just 50 years ago. A human cannot. A human claimed to be worthy of my daughter, the queen interrupted coldly. Let him prove it. Marcus looked at the dark entrance, feeling ancient fear crawl up his spine. He had faced many dangers in his life, but there was something about this darkness that felt fundamentally wrong. It was not the absence of light. It was the presence of something else. Something hungry. He turned to Liara. Do you have something of yours I can carry? Something to remind me what I am fighting for. Without hesitation, Liara removed a small crystal pendant from around her neck. This was my grandmother's. It has been passed down through 5 generations of our family. It means everything to me. Marcus took it carefully, closing his fist around it. The crystal was warm, pulsing gently against his palm. I will bring it back to you. I promise. He kissed her once, quick and fierce, then turned and walked into the darkness before his courage could fail. The temperature dropped immediately. Marcus activated the small light device they had given him, but its beams seemed to be swallowed by the darkness after only a few feet. He could hear water dripping somewhere, the sound distorted and strange. His footsteps echoed wrong, creating sounds that seemed to come from all directions at once. He had been walking for maybe 10 minutes when he first heard them. Whispers. Voices that spoke in languages he almost understood, saying things that made his skin crawl. They spoke his deepest fears in his sister's voice. You could not save me, Marcus. You were not strong enough. You are never strong enough. Marcus squeezed the crystal pendant, using the pain in his palm to anchor himself. Not real, he said aloud. You are not real. But the voices continued, growing louder. They took on the voices of everyone he had ever known. His parents who died in a transport accident. The crew members he had worked with over the years. Even Liara's voice, telling him he was not worthy, that he would fail her as he had failed everyone else. The darkness pressed closer and Marcus felt panic rising. This was different from physical danger. This was something that attacked the mind, that found every weakness and exploited it. His light flickered, and for a moment he was plunged into absolute darkness. In that darkness, Marcus remembered something his sister had told him during one of their late-night conversations. She had been reading about human psychology, about how people overcome trauma. Fear is not the enemy, she had said. Fear is just information. It tells you something matters enough to be afraid of losing it. The people who claim to have no fear are not brave. They are just empty. Real courage is being afraid and choosing to act anyway. Marcus stopped walking. He turned off his light completely, standing in the absolute darkness of the cavern. The voices grew louder, more insistent, pressing against his mind like physical weight. "I am afraid," he said aloud to the darkness. "I am terrified. I'm scared I will fail. I'm scared I will die down here. I'm scared I will lose Liara. I am scared I am not good enough, strong enough, worthy enough." The voices paused, seeming confused. "But I am going forward anyway," Marcus continued, "because being afraid does not mean I am wrong. It means I care. It means this matters. And I would rather die trying than live having not tried at all." He felt something shift in the darkness. The presence that had been pressing against him seemed to pull back just slightly. Marcus realized something profound. These creatures, whatever they were, fed on fear. But they fed on fear that was denied, fear that people ran from. Fear acknowledged, fear accepted was something different. It was not food. It was poison to them. Marcus started walking again, still in darkness, one hand trailing along the cavern wall. He spoke his fears aloud as he went, acknowledging each one, accepting it, then moving past it. "I am afraid of losing people I love. I accept that. I am afraid of not being enough. I accept that. I am afraid of dying before I have really lived. I accept that too." The whispers grew quieter. The presence receded. Marcus walked through darkness that no longer felt quite so oppressive, guided by intuition and stubborn determination. After what felt like hours, he saw a faint glow ahead. He moved toward it, and the glow grew stronger, revealing a chamber that took his breath away. The Chamber of Echoes was a natural cathedral of crystal and stone. The walls were covered in some kind of phosphorescent material that cast a soft blue light. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and on that pedestal lay what appeared to be an ancient artifact, a sphere of dark metal covered in markings. Marcus approached carefully. As he reached for the sphere, he felt the presence again, but this time it was not hostile. It was curious, respectful even. A voice spoke, not in his mind but in the air around him. It was ancient and tired and somehow sad. "You are the first in many cycles to reach this place not through strength or power, but through acceptance of weakness. The first to acknowledge fear rather than deny it. The first to understand that we are not enemies but guardians, testing those who would take what lies here." Marcus picked up the sphere carefully. "What are you guarding?" "Truth," the voice replied. "The truth that courage is not the absence of fear but the acknowledgement of it. Those who came before fought us, denied us, tried to overcome us with force. But fear cannot be conquered. It can only be accepted and integrated. You understand this. Therefore you are worthy." The sphere pulsed once in Marcus's hand, warm and strangely comforting. He nodded to the empty chamber, somehow knowing the presence could see him. "Thank you for the lesson," he said. The journey back was easier, the path seeming clearer, the darkness less oppressive. When Marcus emerged from the cavern entrance, blinking in the sudden daylight, he found a crowd waiting. Liara ran to him immediately, and he handed her the crystal pendant first, before showing anyone the sphere. "I told you I would bring it back," he said. Queen Vethra approached, studying the sphere in his hands. Her eyes widened slightly. "That is the orb of acknowledgement. It has lain in those caverns for 5,000 years. Only 3 individuals in our recorded history have retrieved it." She looked at Marcus with new respect. "You have passed the trial of courage. 2 down. 1 to go." The final trial was held in the throne room once again, but this time it was empty except for the Queen, Liara, and a handful of advisors. The test of heart, it seemed, was more personal. Queen Vethra sat on her throne, studying Marcus with those calculating eyes. "The trial of heart is simple in concept but difficult in execution. I must determine if your feelings for my daughter are genuine, if you are capable of the kind of love that justifies the upheaval you have caused." She gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the air. It showed a human ship in orbit above Thessera. "That vessel arrived this morning," the Queen said. "It is a human diplomatic courier. They have been searching for you, Marcus Chin. They received your distress signal months ago and have finally traced your trajectory here. They are prepared to take you home, back to human space, back to your own people." Marcus felt his heart skip. "Oh. The familiar stars and worlds of human civilization. But there is more," the Queen continued. Her voice was softer now, almost gentle. "We have analyzed your DNA, studied your biology. Humans live such brief lives compared to my people. You will age and die while Liara is still young. You will have perhaps 50 more years, 60 if you are fortunate. She will live for thousands of years beyond that. If you bond with her, you condemn her to grief, to watching you fade, to spending the vast majority of her existence as a widow. She stood, descending from her throne to look directly at Marcus. I offer you a choice. Take that ship. Go home to your people. I will provide you with wealth and resources as compensation for the disruption you have suffered. You will live out your years among your own kind, free and comfortable. All I ask is that you release my daughter from this bonding. Tell her it was a mistake, that you do not truly love her. Let her move on and fulfill her duty to our people. The room was silent. Marcus could feel Liara's eyes on him, but he did not look at her. He stared at the hologram of the human ship, at his ticket home. Everything the Queen said was true. He was condemning Liara to loss, to grief, to loving something that would not last. What right did he have to do that? He thought about his sister again. About their last conversation, hours before the collapse. She had known she was sick, though she hid it well. She had known her time was limited. Do you regret the time we spent together? She had asked him. Knowing it will end? Never, he had said. Then do not think I regret it either, she had told him. Marcus, brief does not mean meaningless. A shooting star lasts only seconds, but people still stop to watch them. A flower blooms for days, not years, but we still plant gardens. Do not confuse duration with value. Marcus finally looked at Liara. She stood there, tears streaming down her face, but she was not crying in fear or sadness. She was crying because she knew what he was about to say. He turned back to the Queen. Your Majesty, everything you say is logical. Everything you offer is generous. By every measure of reason, I should accept. He took a breath. But I am not going to. Why not? The Queen asked, though something in her eyes suggested she already knew. Because Liara is not asking me to guarantee forever. She is asking me to share whatever time we have. Because I have learned that the length of something does not determine its worth. Because in these 3 months, I have felt more alive, more valued, more myself than in all the years before combined. He looked at Liara. Because when I think about leaving, about going home and living another 50 years without her, those 50 years feel empty. But when I think about staying, about having even just one more day with her, that day feels like infinity. He walked to Liara, taking her hands in his. I cannot give you thousands of years, he said softly. I cannot give you the immortality you are used to, but I can give you every single day I have. I can give you mornings and sunsets and shared laughter. I can give you someone who sees you not as a princess or a political piece, but as Liara. Someone who will love you not forever but completely. And maybe that is enough. Liara pulled him close, burying her face in his shoulder. He held her, feeling her shake with emotion. It is more than enough, she whispered. It is everything. Marcus looked back at the Queen, expecting anger or disappointment. Instead, he saw something unexpected in her eyes. They were wet with tears. Do you know, Queen Vethra said quietly, why I created these trials? Why I pushed you so hard? To prove I was not worthy, Marcus said. No. The Queen descended to stand before them. To prove that you were. I have lived for 4,000 years, Marcus Chin. I have seen countless marriages of convenience, political alliances masquerading as love. I have watched my own daughter prepare to sacrifice her happiness for duty as I once did. And when you came into our lives, when Liara chose you, I saw something I had not seen in centuries. I saw real love. Messy and complicated and impossible, but real. She reached out, placing one hand on Liara's shoulder and one on Marcus's. I needed to know it was genuine. I needed to know you would fight for her. I needed to see if you understood that love is not about duration but about depth. About choosing each other again and again regardless of the cost. She smiled and it transformed her face. You passed the trials not because you were strong or clever, though you are both. You passed because you understand something my people have forgotten in our long lives. That every moment is precious precisely because it is fleeting. That love is not diminished by mortality but made more valuable by it. She stepped back, her voice taking on formal tones. Marcus Chin of Earth, I acknowledge your bonding to Princess Liara. I recognize you as consort to the heir of the Thessaran Empire. And I welcome you, truly welcome you into our family. The advisors present bowed their heads, accepting the proclamation. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he had been carrying since the moment the guards found him. Thank you, he said simply. In the weeks that followed, word of the trials spread throughout the Thessaran Empire. The human who solved an ancient riddle. The human who walked through the void caverns and returned with the orb of acknowledgement. The human who chose love over logic, commitment over comfort. Not everyone accepted him. There were protests from traditionalists who saw his presence as an insult to Thessaran purity. There were politicians who worried about the implications of mixing human and Thessaran bloodlines. There were nobles who resented that a commoner, an alien commoner, had won the princess's heart. But there were others who saw something different. Young Thessarans who had never questioned the rigid structure of their society began to wonder if there might be other ways to live. Scientists who had never considered humans worth studying began to realize that brevity of life might lead to innovations in thought. Artists who had created the same styles for millennia began to explore human concepts of mortality and meaning in their work. Marcus became, almost by accident, an ambassador. Not an official one, but something more valuable. A living bridge between two species that had never known each other existed. The human diplomatic ship remained in orbit, and Marcus worked with them to establish formal relations between Earth and Thessera. It was delicate work, navigating cultural differences and expectations, but Marcus had become good at bridging impossible gaps. 6 months after his trial, the first cultural exchange program was established. Human scholars came to study Thessaran philosophy and long-term thinking. Thessaran artists traveled to Earth to experience human urgency and creativity born of mortality. It was not always smooth. There were misunderstandings, conflicts, moments where everything seemed ready to fall apart. But slowly, patiently, the two civilizations began to learn from each other. Marcus stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city one evening, watching 3 moons rise over crystal towers. Liara joined him, slipping her hand into his. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Staying? Giving up your old life?" Marcus thought about the question honestly. He thought about the cargo runs he would never make, the worlds he would never see through the viewport of the Meridian's hope. He thought about Earth, about walking under a single moon instead of 3. "No," he said finally. "I regret nothing. Because I understand now what my sister tried to teach me. Life is not measured in years or in worlds visited or in things accomplished. It is measured in moments that matter. In connections that change you. In love that makes you brave." He turned to face her, cupping her face gently. "I could live 1,000 years and never feel more alive than I do right now with you." Liara smiled, that beautiful smile that had first captured his heart in a garden of glowing flowers. "When your time comes, when you leave me, it will hurt beyond anything I have ever known. I will carry that grief for centuries." "I know," Marcus said softly. "I am sorry for that. Do not be." She kissed him gently. "Because I will also carry the joy, the laughter, the love. And I would rather have 50 years of real connection than 3,000 years of safe, comfortable distance. You taught me that." They stood together, watching the moons rise, 2 beings from different worlds who had found each other against impossible odds. They both knew how the story would end. Every story ended. But endings did not erase the beauty of what came before. In the palace below, human and Thessaran diplomats worked late into the night, building frameworks for cooperation that would last generations. In the city, human tourists walked streets that had never before known outsiders, their wonder at the crystal towers matched by Thessaran curiosity about human art and music. In universities across both civilizations, scholars began asking new questions, exploring ideas that could only come from the collision of different perspectives. One crashed ship. One princess. One mechanic who refused to accept that different meant impossible. Sometimes, that was all it took to change the universe. Marcus pulled Liara closer, breathing in the strange sweet scent of her, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against his chest. In his pocket, he carried his sister's old compass, the one she had given him before she died. "Live enough for both of us," she had said. As 3 moons painted the alien sky in silver and gold and blue, as Liara hummed a Thessaran melody that Marcus was learning to love, as a future neither of them could have imagined unfolded before them, Marcus Chin thought about his sister's final words and smiled. "I am," he whispered to the stars. "I am." Somewhere in the vastness of space, between human worlds and Thessaran territories, between the known and the unknown, between what was and what could be, a bridge had been built. Not of metal or technology, but of 2 hearts that chose each other across every barrier the universe could construct. And if that bridge would one day crumble, as all things mortal must, well, it stood for now. It held. And while it held, it carried hope and possibility and proof that love was not bound by biology or duration or logic. It was bound only by the courage to reach across the darkness and say, "I choose you. Despite everything. Despite the odds. Despite the ending. I choose you." And that, in the end, was the most human thing of all.